Anupama Srinivasan and Anirban Dutta will be screening two films at Sydney Film Festival this year about nature, people, and triumph. Flickering Lights and Nocturnes. Anu, Anirban, thank you so much and welcome to the For Your Reference podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, you guys look great, especially since you have two films coming out, which is very exciting. Did it always happen to be that way, or did the mystics of the world just make it so?
Well, we started Flickering Lights around 7, 8 years back, and that took a long time to make. And meanwhile, we made another film, which took 5 years. So they just happened to sort of coincide. So we premiered Flickering Lights in October in Busan in 2023. And Nocturnes was at Sundance in January, so within 3 months. So that's why they're both doing the festival rounds in 2024.
So it's almost like, in Sydney, we have a mini retrospective.
Yeah. Yeah. As the kids say, we're booked and busy, you know?
Exactly.
Well, because we have such in-depth, and I think that's what people don't, well, not that they need to, but they probably don't necessarily realize that this is years of work that goes into a making, especially of a documentary, right? I do want to start off with Flickering Lights. That was the one that I guess flickered my attention. Because you can imagine the Sydney Film Festival program, I think there's over 200 sort of titles there. And I was very interested in watching this, and my partner OT, we watched the screener together, and it's very interesting because it talks about a history that I wasn't even necessarily across as well. And I think there was a very good way of the title cards that were used, not just at the start of the film, but also throughout, about the Naga people as well as the Indian government, and I guess the sort of tension and the ongoing conflict that was there as well. I guess from a filmmaking point of view, what was that balance like of, oh, what if they don't know enough, or this, they might need to know this at this particular time?
So as filmmakers, we believe in making immersive films. So we do not push for story or narrative. We try to be with the community and let the rhythm of the community take over and see what is the pace of the life, how things are moving. But given that we were very much aware of what was going on, once we edited it, we felt that there were this little, if for a better word, possibly hooks, story hooks that were needed for the audience to get that little bit of those nuggets for them to flow with the immersion. So we just gave those nuggets, and those nuggets were given through the cards that we are talking about, that you are talking about. So that way it kind of, and the illustrations with that kind of happen to, help tell what we wanted to kind of tell or show.
And Anirban is the one who made the illustrations. And
very nice.
And most of them he had sketched while we were on location, like in dull moments when we weren't shooting, and we were just sitting in the village. Yeah.
Where the people are, there was a couple of times in the film where they forgot that you guys were there, which I guess is credit to your filmmaking style as well, right?
Yeah, we actually shot for many days over 3, 4 years. So we visited the village many times, and we used to live there and live like everybody else in the village. So the whole process was also about us who live in Delhi, quite far away from where the film is shot in mainland India, going to the northeast, which is in a way a bit cut off from the rest of India, and people there feel alienated. So for us, this film was our effort to make a bridge. And so we wanted to go live there and then make those human connections first and interact with people like just people and not as filmmakers with a camera. So for us, that was sort of the greatest sort of gift of the film, is that we were able to go beyond that and sort of make human connections.
And I think it's interesting. I obviously don't want to spoil it, but there were some moments in the film where you guys were right in there at early hours of the morning. And I'm like, oh, they must have been living in the community to be able to get those very specific time sensitive sort of shots. And I think that's also a great point as well, because whether it's streaming or whatever it is, I think people get used to documentaries being a sort of way or having a sort of narrative. And it was interesting watching Flickering Lights, because it really is a day in the life of. It really is a singular focus, and not necessarily feeding, this is going to be the end, like, you know where you're going to go at the end of this, because that's very much, I guess, the triumph of the community as well in Torah, right? Of today might be the day, today might not be the day, but we're here.
I think very well said. I think as filmmakers, we have an aesthetic and political point of view. When we make films, we feel that this kind of a certain three-act structure, which creates a crisis, and then there is a resolution of the crisis at the end of the film, is something that is being fed through the streaming platforms, the television, the Hollywood narrative. But that's not the way life unfolds.
Yeah. Life does this.
So life has its own rhythm, and every place has its own rhythm. So why should all films have similar structure? So we said, instead of being nervous as a filmmaker, whether we have an end, whether we have a crisis, we said, let us be here and absorb how the life is unfolding in front of us. And whatever that time it is, let us spend that time staying here in the villages, in the village, and to see what we come up with, and then try to make a film out of that.
Absolutely. But that's exactly how it is. Like, it's like life, like it continues, it doesn't continue. And I really appreciated the commentary that was in the film, because the interesting thing is, it's, I guess, the log line, or what brings you to the film, is the electricity, but it's so much more than that. You know, it's the hope of the community. It's the living of generations and decades that we see throughout the film. There's mentions of curfew. There's so much that's going on, and being able to achieve that in a way, like Anu was saying, it's of people. We're doing it of people, and that's how it should be done. It should be handled with care. Unfortunately, I want to make sure that we cover Nocturnes as well. But is there anything that's important that you want to cover?
Yeah, definitely. I would like to say Anu is the principal cinematographer of the film. So her gaze, how she filmed, is very much part of the experience that you are left with. And as filmmakers, we also made some aesthetic choices. The most of the film is shot with a 50 mm block lens. There is no zoom in the film.
No.
So you wait and you don't give a false sense of intimacy when you are actually not by zooming in.
Yeah.
So that meditation, and also the height of the camera, we are fans of Ozu, the great Japanese filmmaker. So the most of the film is shot at a certain height, which is about 3 feet from the ground, where people sat on small stools around the fire every day. So we put the camera most of the time in that height, so that created a certain kind of being present in that space. So, this is just for audience to kind of invite the audience to come and experience it as we felt living in the village, sitting on those small stools and chairs along with the community.
It was definitely shot in a beautiful and intimate and in a very caring way. So hats off. So you're just both so natural sort of storytellers, and you can see it coming through.
And I also just wanted to add a little bit about the context of this community, and especially many communities in Northeast India, that the general way in which they come across in mainstream media, which is very rare in India, they are not even talked about. Yeah. But if they are, it's usually as victims of violence. So it's always like there was an insurgent attack, or the army killed this many people, and there's just numbers of people who died. Yeah. Or there are, they feature sometimes in travel kind of programs as this exotic community who has this very different way of life, and it's a total exoticization of the Naga people. So we were very conscious that as filmmakers, as thinking people, as sensitive people, we want to engage with this community in a very different way, in a very direct way, without having these kind of other and really just throw away those representations totally. And that's why we chose this thread of electricity, because that's something that people all over the world could relate to and have been living with, and these people are still struggling for it. And the political thread just sort of is very subtle and just present enough, because otherwise most stories that come from there is just dominated by that. It's just about the violence. But we didn't want to leave that out, because that is, even though everything might look beautiful and idyllic, there is always a threat or a thing hovering around that any day there might be a blockade, and then that might last for months.
Yeah, I think it was done very effectively, and I really appreciate the lens of, I guess, like in the media in India and how it is portrayed. Because I think that was one of the questions that I wasn't necessarily going to bring in the interview, but I was like, oh, okay, like I'm learning about the blockade stuff, but I'm like, okay, but that makes sense in the context that you're giving as well. And oh, the Talanoas in Tongan, like the discussions that we could have about this film. I'm so sorry we have to move on, but I really absolutely loved Flickering Lights. And another delightful surprise was Nocturnes, because we got an opportunity to watch it as well as a part of this interview. And yeah, like if you could have two very different documentaries to pair together, it would absolutely be this one. I would love to know how this actually came about, and just like moths of all sort of subject matter and creatures out in the wild. How did this documentary or project come to be?
So we live in Delhi, and Delhi is one of the most polluted cities in the world. And we are choking during winter because of the pollution, and we are dying of the heat in summer. Right now it is 50 degrees centigrade in Delhi.
Wow.
So it's a very extreme place where we are living. And we were slowly feeling that with our devices, with our life completely taken over by our cell phone, our iPads, there was something very simple, like connecting to nature, listening to sound, talking to each other with attention. We're going away from our life. And we were looking for an idea to make a film which was an invitation to connect deeply, to hear with more intent. And then we met Mansi, our main protagonist, human protagonist rather, because we feel moths are our main protagonists. In one of the projects that we were doing in Western Himalayas. And then she described this fascinating scene, and she said, my real love is moth. And I work in this place in Arunachal in the northeast of India. And when we put up this white screen and switch on the blue light, thousands of moths hold to the screen. And the moment she described it, Anu and I looked at each other and said, there's a film there.
I think she described it as dripping at one point, like the moths were dripping on
That's
us.
right.
Yeah.
So it's like this, we were missing something in our life, and then we just had this interaction with this amazing person. And when we went there, we felt, oh, this is a film which can be this invitation that we want to bring to the world, where you come and experience it. We were trying to create an experience like the first time you went to a planetarium and you looked up. And you were not looking for a story. You were in awe.
The possibilities are endless. There's no bills to pay. Life is limitless.
That's right. And actually, looking at that screen every night in Arunachal Pradesh, there were multiple narratives that were possible. And that is what we wanted. We want our audience to build by going through this experience that we went through there.
So Anu, I guess, bringing the sort of framing and the lens that we had in Flickering Lights and making sure the care was there, was it a challenge in trying to do the same for moths?
So we had this incredible camera person for Nocturnes, Satya Rai Nagpal, who's a very dear friend and an amazing camera person who also has a background in entomology.
Wow.
So he actually has worked with moths and butterflies in his college days. And so coming into this project, we really felt that apart from his sort of amazing sense of light, of how he treats light, his love for insects was also one of the reasons we wanted to work with him, because I think for engaging with something which is so repetitive, because the whole film almost follows this action of the scientist and her team putting up a screen and waiting for the moths. And that's what science is about. It's about, this rigor of doing it
Consolidating result, yeah.
And then it's only then that you get even a very, very small result. So we needed somebody who can bring a freshness to the gaze every night and look at it with love and attention every night, and not that, oh, we've done this, we've done this 5 times, we don't need to do this again, and film every moth with care. And so he would remember, like, oh, in the last schedule, we've already filmed this particular species, so he would remember it because he was so interested. So I think that that his attention to detail really sort of helped the visual language of the film. And in a sense, Anirban, I and Satya had a sort of unified cinematic sort of vision for the film in terms of the pace, the duration of the shots. And as we went along in the process, we slowed down. Actually, because coming from the city, initially we were taking shorter shots, and then after we used to keep saying, no, slower, longer, hold it. And then in the edit, we sort of took it to another level in which we were very selective in the scenes that we used. And then within the scenes, we allowed time to expand. And then within, like, there are some shots in which in the scene, like if there are, say, 10 shots, there are only 2 shots in which we see human beings. All the rest is with the moths and the sounds of the moths. And so the whole thing was, how can we draw your attention to an insect that you might hate or you might not even have thought about, and make you see the beauty of it, and then entrance you with the beauty first, and then way towards the end we understand why they are important, or how they hold the ecosystem together. But we didn't want it to like be a science lesson or something to teach you something. It's more about just looking at the world in wonder and falling in love with the moths and the forest.
And I think that's something that I really appreciate about your filmmaking is, like, we're not rushing. We're not like trying to get to well, I guess it's a documentary, but we're not getting to like a peak twist or something. We're allowing ourselves to breathe and exist. And sometimes we need a bit more of that in life. And I really appreciated in Nocturnes in particular, those sprawling sort of shots that felt like those textural sort of like landscape wallpapers,
Very much so, because as you rightly said, we are just so tired of running all the time. And what are we running for? And what are we doing to ourselves? I think there is a need throughout our lives right now to kind of slow down. And there's a beautiful word called mindfulness, of having that presence of your thoughts when you are doing an action. And in this film, the whole idea of seeing with more intent, and the soundscape that we worked with, the immersive sound where we recorded the sound with 5.1 microphones, stereo microphones. The idea was to create this world where you get immersed with the sound and at looking. So then you form your own narratives. You look at the blue moth, the green moth, the yellow moth, and then you say, oh, what is this moth doing? First, you look as a whole, then you make your own pick within that. So as filmmakers, we wanted you to slowly discover. So tomorrow, if you see Nocturnes again, you'll discover more. Because there are many things that are there in layers that you will discover.
Absolutely. And something that I really appreciated was the title card at the end, talking, acknowledging the Indigenous people and the land on which you're in. And, most people will probably say you didn't need to do that. But for me, And I love and laud Black and Brown and Indigenous cinema. Like that, I was like, good. And I was like, but that also makes sense because it wasn't a surprise to me based on how beautifully you film everything from the earth to moths to people.
Thank you.
I think, isn't it important that we acknowledge the people on whose land we are standing are able to make that film? They have kept this forest so that we can go and make that film. So there shouldn't be any other way, right? That's like a minimum we can do to acknowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how naturally, you speak about the great team that you had, or maybe teams that you had across the board. Did you want to spend any time like just giving love and flowers to people that worked on both of the films? I know we don't have enough time, but like just a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Anu, please.
Yeah, we were so fortunate to work with Yael Beton as the editor. She's absolutely fantastic. Again, somebody who we totally aligned with cinematically and who really pushed the film to be very, very economical, actually. Because Anirban's and my tendency is a little bit more digressing. And then I think Yael sort of brought a focus and allowed that time to be compressed, but at the same time, you are able to flow with it in a very meditative way without the duration of the film being like 2 hours. So I think that was really her exceptional skill and talent that allowed us to do it, apart from the fact that she's a great friend now. And the
That's a
sound
great
team,
editor though, right? Because then you would have like a 20-hour documentary.
yeah, exactly. And we had an incredible sound team. There was and we did our sound mix in New York. There was this amazing sound engineer and a sound designer, Tom Paul, who we worked with, and Shreyank Nanjappa and Neetu Mohandas back in India, who did all the groundwork and the track laying and the organization of all the material for like 3-4 months before we headed to New York. So, and then we had Shukanto Majumdar, who was a location sound recordist, and under very, very difficult circumstances, kept the equipment safe and kept recording sound through rain and storm. So I think they've all done an incredible job. And it's just, and then we had amazing support from Sandbox Films, who were our, co-producers and the executive producers of, Jess and Greg, who have been associated with the film from 2020. So they've been with us from the beginning and helping us and cheering for us throughout. And thanks to them, we were able to really elevate the film, I think, in terms of getting the best crew on board. And also their amazing sound studio where we got a chance to work at.
And also, this film also happened because of the incredible work done by the Biodiversity Lab of Ramana Atreya, who have been working there for 25 years. It's not a small feat to work in this very remote part of India with very little resources, day in and day out. His team, he has been doing this. And the wonderful Bugun community who has made this reserve forest as a buffer to the main forest. That is why all these beautiful organisms live. So hats off to these guys for preserving this, for allowing us to come to their place and tell this incredible, create this incredible experience to share with the world.
Well, hats off to the both of you as well. I'm going to wrap up with our final question, but it might be a bit of a cheat because our final question is we finish off our reviews with a recommendation. So what would you pair with the film as a double feature? I guess you could just say Flickering Lights and Nocturnes, but if you also want to add another film in people's watching sort of experience, would you like to add one?
Yeah, we would definitely like to add Payal Kapadia's film, which just won at Cannes. Wonderful Indian filmmaker.
Yes, congrats.
Yeah, and please go and see her film along with our film, Flickering Lights and Nocturnes. We are very proud of her work and the wonderful work she does. So, and
Our film is called All We Imagine as Light. Now I remember it.
All We Imagine as Light. And I'm very, very happy because she is a woman Indian filmmaker. We really need to celebrate the contribution of women to Indian cinema. And so we are proud and very happy that she's made this amazing film, which is at Sydney.
Anu, would you like to add another film? I think that's a great three combination.
Yeah, well, I'm not too familiar with the program at Sydney, so I'm not sure.
Or just films in general, but yeah.
Oh, films in general. Yeah, I mean, we are huge fans of Apichat Pong. So any film of Apichat Pong, Veera Setakul, the lovely Thai filmmaker.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for both of your time. I appreciate your time in taking this interview, but I specifically appreciate how open and how much we were able to dig deep, and we're lifting each other up, even other filmmakers as well. And it's been such a beautiful space to chat to the both of you today.
Thank you.
Thank you, and hope to see you in Sydney.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.